Okay. Hey everybody, how you doing? Having a good Sunday? Oh, you better believe I was, up until about, like, a minute ago. I was setting up for this video, getting my microphone out, taking everything and setting it up, and I accidentally tapped myself right in the Tony choppers. Yeah, that was not a pleasant experience. By the way, while I'm on the subject of this, and since we're starting the video off with that, maybe if you're a doctor or maybe like some sort of nut scientist, you can explain this to me. But whenever you get and if you don't have the same equipment, you don't get it. But if you get lightly tapped in that general family jewel region, it sometimes doesn't hurt at first, but give it like 15 seconds and it tends to, yeah, no, it's not a fun experience. Okay, so, are we done with that? Are we done with that subject matter of me discussing that? Okay, cool. Anyway, today's video is going to be about Logia weaknesses, guys. Alright, so, I'm going to take you back to a far-gone era of One Piece. An era before hockey. Whoa! Remember that? Remember back as far as we were, aware as the fandom, a Logia Devil Fruit user was essentially nigh invincible. Remember when Luffy first fought Smoker at Logtown and he was trying to punch him, but he just couldn't hit him because, made of smoke. It's kind of hard to punch smoke. I know I've tried multiple times. It's not very easy to do. There was a guy a few towns over that was able to do it, but he wouldn't show me the trick. Freaking douchebag. But anyway, yeah, Smoker could turn into smoke. Crocodile could turn into sand. And we're like, what are you gonna do? Like, the only way we figured, you could actually fight against a Logia is if you yourself had a Logia power, like when Ace fought against Smoker. Which, by the way, if that fight would have went on, longer, Ace would have definitely won, but it was a neat little exchange between the two, So, this is when Oda explained that, Devil Fruits do have natural weaknesses. Not every single one, but some of them do have natural weaknesses to either other fruit abilities or just elements in general. And Crocodile had a huge weakness. That was something that kind of counterbalanced, Crocodile's abilities, because while Crocodile was in Alabasta, which was a desert nation, and he has the power of the Suna no Mi, or the Sand fruit, he was basically a god, right? Because that fruit's powerful enough when you're just in a regular, environment like a town or a city or something, but Crocodile was in a desert country, and he had the power of sand. It's a Gaara all up in this, okay, right? So he could do all this crazy stuff. He can whirl up an entire sandstorm to wipe out an entire city. All he had to do was snap his fingers to make that happen. But then we found out his weakness, and it was remarkably simple, really. His weakness, just a nice little cup of water. Not even a cup of water, really. All Luffy did was just get his hand a little wet from the Yuba water that he had around his neck, and then he was able to just grab right onto Crocodile's hand and almost, crush it. Because he cannot turn that part of his body into sand as long as it's wet. And it doesn't have to necessarily be with water, it can be with any liquid. Of course, we all know water is the standard weakness of all Devil Fruits, so in Crocodile's case, that just really sucks. He's, quad weak to it. It's how, in Pokemon, if you have, a straight fire type, let's just use Slugma for an example. Slugma is 2 times weak to water-type attacks. That's most Devil Fruit users, just weak to water if they get submerged in it. But then you take that up to, Macargo, who's Slugma's evolved form, who's a rock fire type, he is quad weak to water. So that's Crocodile in particular, where he's not just weak to getting submerged in water, like all Devil Fruit users are. No, you could literally take him out with a Super Soaker. I'm making it seem a lot easier than it sounds, but as long as any part of his body is moist, then you can grab onto him, you can punch him, you can attack him. So Luffy didn't even really need a lot of water to make that happen, and he was able to do it. Now, like I said, I'm making it sound a lot easier because Crocodile was very adept with his fruit, and once again, when he's in a desert, yeah, all you really need to do is just, splash some water on your hand, and then run up and just punch Crocodile really hard in the face. But, have fun trying to get that close to him, while he has the power of the sand at his disposal. He can turn the entire desert against you. It doesn't have to be the desert. He can turn the entire ground into sand and manipulate it there. He can send out sand blades at you and stuff. And his own fruit does have a counter to this weakness. However, it is sort of you have to be in the right place at the right time sort of thing, because Crocodile's right hand can absorb all that moisture. So if you are covered in some sort sort of liquid and you try to fight him, yeah, you're able to hit him, but if he can, like, grab you first and then with his right hand, and he can suck up all the moisture and you're screwed, okay? But that was a pretty cool way to show, like, a weakness that Crocodile has. The weakness made sense, and even knowing that weakness, Luffy could not beat him right away. The first fight, Luffy just got completely destroyed because he had no idea what he was doing. Remember that time Luffy tried to you know, copy Wapple's ability? You know, it was like, Gamu Gamu no Baku Baku, and tried to eat Crocodile, and he tried to capture him with a net. Luffy was literally just throwing darts at a wall and trying to figure out what stuck. Unfortunately, nothing did. Oh, wait, no, something did stuck, and that was Luffy on the end of Crocodile's hook. That stuck pretty good. So, yeah. The second fight, he found out the weakness, and he became Water Luffy! The supreme type of Luffy, if I have to say so myself. Wait, I don't know. Where does Water Luffy stack up against Afro Luffy? Is an Afro stronger than a Super Soaker? I think maybe. If we're gonna... I want to get a scientist involved in there. Astrophysicist might have to look into that. But anyway, yeah. He becomes Water Luffy, and he just, you know, consumes all the water in the tank, and then he starts spraying Crocodile with water, which, once again, if he gets doused in it, that sucks, but he can, you know, drain all that moisture if he really wants to with his ability. It's just, it's kind of hard to do that when you're in the middle of a fight and everything, but Crocodile still ended up winning. He ended up grabbing Luffy with his right hand and draining all the moisture out of him. It wasn't until the third fight when they were in the tomb, and Luffy was covered in his own blood, which is still a liquid, so it still worked, that he was able to take out Crocodile. Now, that got me thinking about how other Logia weaknesses might go down, so that's what we're going to go through today. There aren't that many Logia users in the One Piece world. I think there's actually only 12, you know, different characters that have a Logia fruit, and I believe that is including Sabo and Ace, but they have the same devil fruit, so we're just going to go through these here. Now, not every single one of these might have a weakness, and it's also important to mention that this isn't only limited to Logias, it's just that Logias are the ones that feel it the most, because a big benefit of being a Logia is that you can turn your entire body into an element. That's insanely useful, okay, on the battlefield, as long as your opponent doesn't have armament hockey or your natural weakness, okay? Now, other devil fruits, like the Paramecia, they all have, in zones, they have weaknesses too, like, for instance, Galdino's Doro Doro no Mi, the Wax fruit. He cannot make his wax if he's in an environment that's really hot. But Galdino himself can't really turn into wax, so it sucks he can't use his fruit, but it's not like it's a huge weakness because, you know, he's used to being a flesh and blood human. A lot of times with Logias, what Peckham said when he was fighting Karibo, you know, Logias get it into their head that they're invincible because they can become their element and they can let most attacks pass through them, so they kind of tend to let their guard down a lot. Now, in the situation with the Admirals and with Crocodile, they learned to reflexively turn their bodies into their elements and stuff, and they were aware of this weakness, so they didn't, you know, they kind of can compensate for that. But somebody like Karibo, who's an idiot, he's creepy, sure, but he's also an idiot, he was under the impression that, like, oh, I can just turn into mud and let any attack pass through me, or I could store it inside of me, so I don't need to worry about shit. Yeah, so in their cases, when they're letting their guard down, you know, that's a big weakness if they, you know, can suddenly get hit by something. In Galdino's case, he's already used to being a flesh and blood human, so whenever it's really hot out, it's like, crap, well, I can't use my wax powers, but I'm still, you know, used to fighting and everything. So, we're gonna go through these. I already mentioned Crocodile in length, and he's the one that really got, you know, the most attention for this weakness. Oda even came out and said in an SBS, as kind of just to tie this all together, he specified that with Crocodile, even something like taking a shower, like while bathing, he has to be careful, because if someone were to attack him while he's in the shower, he can't turn into sand right away. So, yeah, Crocodile's weakness is very apparent, and there's a lot of water everywhere because there's a lot to drink, but also it's One Piece. The entire world is covered with ocean, pretty much. So, yeah, if you found out the weakness of Crocodile and you prepared yourself, it's still going to be a tough fight, but that's, you know, you don't even need hockey to really necessarily beat him. As long as you're skilled enough and you are covered in some type of liquid, then you're set. Okay, and you avoid his right hand at all costs. Okay, so moving on, I want to talk about Ace and Sabo right now, the Mera Mera no Mi. Now, the first thing you're going to think of is, obviously, what do you fight fire with? Well, okay, fire is that particular saying, but you know what I mean, like water, right? You're going to use water on them. Like, yeah, if you, like, take an entire tidal wave and then crash it down on Ace and Sabo, It might hurt them. It depends on how hot they can really make their fire, because it doesn't really matter how much water you have if you can get a flame that's hot enough, especially when Ace was doing that, like, flame commandment, Diankai! When he was doing that kind of shit, you know, a big wave of water coming at him, Ace might he might be able to evaporate it like that, right? So I really, yes, water is a weakness with, you know, fire, you know, it depends on how much you have and everything, but I wanted to really kind of just think outside the box on this one a little bit. I don't know why I love that sight gag so much. I just do. But, yeah, okay, so let's try to think of other things what fire is weak to. And I start to think, I'm like, well, you need oxygen to have fire, right? I mean, try to, you know, light a fire and then cover it up with, like, a cup or something. It's not gonna, the fire's gonna go out because it ran out of oxygen to burn. Okay, well, what if you had, like, some sort of devil fruit user that can manipulate gases? You know where I'm going with this. Caesar Clown could totally kick Ace's and Sabo's asses. Yep, 100%. Because here's the thing. Here's the cool thing, okay? When you get introduced to Caesar Clown, he has the power of the gas fruit, right? And you're thinking like, oh, well, all we gotta do is light him on fire then. You know, like just throw some sort of burning attack at him, and, you know, he'll ignite, and then everything will be copacetic. He'll be taken out, right? But the thing is, not all of the gases that he emits, he's the Logia of gas, just in general. And so some gases are more flammable than others, and so he can make it so that his fire doesn't really just combust that easily, right? Like, he's made of gas, and he has a technique called Blue Sword, where he literally takes the hilt of a sword, gas comes out of it, and then he ignites that to make, like, a blue flame sword, okay? If his entire body was just constantly flammable, you know, he wouldn't be able to fight with a giant burning blade. You know, he would ignite his blue sword, and then his whole body would light up. You know, that's not how it works, right? And more importantly, Caesar can actually remove the oxygen from around him. He did this with Luffy to make Luffy pass out, but also, can you imagine if that was a fight against Caesar and Ace? And Ace is rocking up to Caesar, and he lights himself up, and he's like, bring it on! He can! And then just launches a big ball of fire at Caesar, and Caesar can, once again, he just snap his fingers and just remove all the oxygen from around him. It doesn't affect Caesar, and then just, and then that flame would just get snuffed out like that. You know, there's nothing to burn, you know? And so that would be an interesting fight. Now, in terms of, like, a physical brawl, Ace would just, or Sabo would just destroy Caesar. I'm imagining a fight where that happens, like Ace gets lit up with fire, goes to attack Caesar, Caesar takes away all of the oxygen, and, yeah, there's no oxygen, Ace couldn't breathe, which is something else. Caesar's a lot more badass than you give him credit for. I mean, he's a scum, he's total scum, but you know, he can do some crazy stuff with his fruit as long as he stops cowering in a corner for a few seconds. He was rather intimidating. Remember those first few scenes in Punk Hazard when he was just this gaseous ball of evil? You know, like that was kind of terrifying, and then he became this. But, yeah, if, you know, Ace's fire gets snuffed out, even if he couldn't breathe really quick, Ace could just grab Caesar and just arm him in hockey and just, and then that would be the fight right there. But still, that would be a very important weakness for the Nomi. Not just water, which is the obvious, but any sort of, not just, you know, the removal of oxygen, but any chemical. You know, like the equivalent here would be that haline stuff they use to, you know, if it's in like some sort of a vault area where you don't want water sprinklers, you know, and haline is way more effective at, you know, quelling a fire. Stuff like that. Some sort of chemical that you can maybe douse Ace or Sabo with, and while they're covered with this chemical, they can't flame on, so to speak. Actually, that just made me think of the Human Torch from Marvel, and I'm not a comic book guy, I don't read into that kind of stuff, but I know comic books, and they're so, you know, the history of it, it's so vast and everything, so I'm gonna make the assumption, I'm not even that much into the Fantastic Four, but I'm gonna make the assumption that at some points in the Fantastic Four comic books, some evil villain figured out a way to, like, you know, stop the Human Torch from actually flaming on, you know, some sort of chemical or something to prevent him from doing that. I haven't read into this period, but I'm sure that probably happened at some point. Right. So that's with Ace and Saba. I just wanted to talk about, like, yeah, just beyond the obvious thing, which is water. Now, talking about the Admirals now, let's get into that. Alright, so we got Akainu, we got Aokiji, and we got Kizaru. All three of them are Logia users. And, Akainu, and this is something important to mention involving the Mera no Mi, coming off of that, on top of having, you know, weaknesses, like natural weaknesses, there are some devil fruits that are like the second stage of like that, you know, type of fruit's evolution, so to speak. That's kind of a bad way of putting it. You know, there are some fruits that are just superior to others in that same category. Like, for instance, when we're talking about the Magu no Mi that Akainu has, that's the superior version of Ace's Mera no Mi, because the Mera no Mi can create fire. Well, the Magu no Mi can do that too. It can also create fire, because its main function is to create magma. So fire is just kind of like a byproduct of magma. You know, anything that Akainu throws his magma balls at is going to get lit up. The surrounding area is going to get lit up because it's magma. So it's kind of like that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't matter who has the Magu no Mi, and it doesn't matter who has the Mera no Mi. The Magu's always going to win 100% of the time, all of the time. That's not what it means. It really comes down to the person that's using the fruit and how they can do it. Keep in mind, Akainu probably had the power of the magma fruit for decades, you know, at least, you know, before, you know, Ace. And Ace, you know, only got the Mera no Mi within the last 3 years or so of his life, so, which was a relatively short one. So, you know, that would make more sense. You know, it might have been if the situation was flipped. Let's say Ace had the power of the Mera no Mi for like 20 years, and Akainu only recently got it, or somebody else recently acquired the Magu no Mi. That doesn't mean it's an instant win, just because you have magma, and magma is the superior version of fire. Another way to look at it is there's other fruits that aren't even Logias that are superior. Like, for instance, you have Mr. 1's Supa no Mi, which is the blade fruit, and then you have the superior version of that, Baby 5's Buki no Mi, which is the arms fruit, okay? It's the superior version, sure, but that doesn't mean it's an automatic victory. It doesn't necessarily mean like Baby 5 could turn into Sickle Girl, and then Mr. 1 can create his arm blades, and Baby 5's sickle is obviously going to cut right through the blades because it's the superior version. No, that's not how it works. It just means there's more stuff she can do with it on top of all of the stuff Mr. 1 can do. Same thing with Katakuri and Luffy. Katakuri can pretty much do everything Luffy can. Not exactly, because Luffy has like Gear 4th and everything, but in terms of stretching and expanding his body, he can do all that stuff too, plus the added factor of stickiness because of Mochi. Okay, so I just wanted to add that distinction there. Okay, now in regards to Akainu's weakness, I actually had to think about this for a little bit because it's not the same thing as fire. Magma is basically molten rock and gases and other like volatile things mixed in with it, sometimes crystals, and it's just this like this semi-solid, this goop. Okay, so I had to think of something like what could prevent Akainu from like becoming magma, and I thought like you would need something ridiculously cold, like redonkulously cold. Like you would need to like have his entire body like, you know, dropped, you know, like this entire area around his body like dropped to such an extremely low temperature that his body just simply like magma simply could not exist in that temperature. You would need something like that, you know, to prevent to the point where like you know the rocks and the gases could not exist in that state. That was the best thing I could come up with. And then you start to think Akainu fought against Aokiji for days on Punk Hazard, and you'd figure that if there was going to be any fruit that Aokiji's would be naturally weak to, it would be Akainu's, because his is ice, and Akainu's is fucking magma! You know, take a ball of ice, and take some magma, you know, just get some. Just go out in your backyard and dig up some magma. It won't take that long. And then just throw some magma on that ice, and I wonder how long it's going to take for it to melt. You know what I mean? So, but they fought for days. Now, granted, Akainu did end up winning that fight, but it was by no means an easy victory for Akainu. Akainu got some battle scars from that. Sure, Aokiji lost a leg, but, you know, it wasn't an easy victory for him like you'd figure it would be. Now, once again, you have to account for the fact that these are both admirals we're talking about here. They've had their fruits for a very long time. They've trained with their fruits for a very long time. Aokiji was the guy that was able to reflexively, like, change his body structure when Whitebeard was about to run him through with his Bicento. So they're both really freaking skilled here, and any like, standard weakness weaknesses, it probably doesn't even apply to them at that point. They're obviously both awakened because they were able to just change the terrain of Punk Hazard permanently with their fight. So, yeah, you have to take into account their skill level as well. But I started to think, like, okay, how could Aokiji actually manage to, like, mitigate Akainu's magma and actually deal damage to him, okay? Because I'm just thinking, like, I'm imagining Aokiji sending out that, like, that pheasant thing he did, and I could just imagine, you know, Akainu countering with Red Dog, and the Red Dog just washing over the ice, you know, just melting it on contact, right? Like he did at Marineford. So then I may think, like, maybe Aokiji had some sort of ability where he could, like, render the area around Akainu down to, like, absolute zero or near absolute zero, because actually getting to absolute zero is kind of difficult, impossible, kind of. But, yeah, if he could do some sort of, like, a technique that dropped that temperature so freaking redonkulously low that Akainu tried to turn into magma and he couldn't, and then that's when Aokiji attacked him. Now, maybe this was a technique that was so dangerous, you know, Aokiji doesn't use it very often, and, you know, they were on Punk Hazard, which was this wasteland and stuff, and it might have only been, like, an awakening move or something, but that's one idea of how their fight could have lasted so long, and how Aokiji could have, at the end of the day, been, like, a worthy opponent, been a match for Akainu, who seems to be the natural weakness. And, in fact, hey, that might, in fact, be the natural weakness. It's just that he's so strong and he's so skilled at using his fruit, he was able to create a way to overcome it. Like, who knows, maybe Crocodile might someday figure out a way to overcome that immediate weakness to water. He kind of already does with his right hand, but he might figure out a way to just not even use his right hand. Maybe he'll figure out some way to absorb the moisture no matter where it is on his body. I don't know. But yeah, in terms of that, I would say that magma is definitely the natural weakness of ice, but in Aokiji's case, it doesn't really matter because he's just so skilled at using that fruit. He still lost the fight, but he was still able to, like, you know, give Akainu a run for his money there. Okay. Now, moving on to Kizaru. Now, his ability is light, and yeah, that's kind of hard to trump. You know, like, alright, well, what can kind of, you know, prevent light from, you know, getting places and stuff. Then you start thinking about, like, oh, what about Brulee's Mirror Mirror no Mi? That actually, maybe that might work. I don't know. Because you gotta figure, though, also, that, like, Kizaru has laser beams. Like, okay, there are laser beams that exist right now in our world, and we use them to cut diamonds and shit. You know, neodymium, you know, like, if you use one of those neodymium laser beams to, like, if you shoot that at, like, a mirror, like a normal mirror you could buy at, like, Walmart or something, I'm pretty sure that the laser would just cut through the mirror. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think this deadly laser beam designed to slice a diamond in half, I don't think that would just bounce off the mirror and then cut my wall. I'm pretty sure it would cut right through it. So, in terms of that, though, you're on the right track. You would need some sort of prism that's, like, really, really thick to maybe mitigate or trap Kizaru's light. And, yeah, that would be something that we're actually going to get to later with Eneru's fruit, so I'm going to put that on the side for right now, but just keep that in mind here of another devil fruit, that's actually yet to appear in the story, but it might very well exist, and I think that would be a pretty cool ability, so we'll get to that. But beyond, like, reflecting or refracting Kizaru's laser beams, his light, what else can stop light in its tracks? I'm like, well, if you know anything about black holes, they can trap light, you know, and even light can't escape from those things. So, Blackbeard, darkness, right? And that opens up a whole other can of worms here. Okay. I saw this theory on the internet. This is not my own thing. I'm pretty sure I saw it on the subreddit, but I don't remember who said it or what. I don't know how long it's been out there, but I saw this theory revolving around Blackbeard's Yami Yami no Mi, and okay, and it goes like this. Blackbeard's fruit, as he stated, he cannot turn intangible with its ability. Alright, like most Logias, they can turn intangible. Blackbeard cannot. But somebody brought up, he's like, you know, the natural weakness of darkness is light. So, if that would be the case, every time Blackbeard has used his Yami Yami no Mi, it's always been during the day when he fought against Ace. Not only did he have to deal with Ace's fire putting out light, but also the sun. At Marineford, it was the same thing. Now, yeah, granted, in Impel Down, it was underground, but still, there was light. It might not just be natural light, it might be any sort of light. Could mitigate it. Except that one time, remember, when he was about to steal Whitebeard's Gura Gura no Mi, what did they do? They threw that black tarp over Whitebeard's body, and then Blackbeard went under it, and then he did something, and then he walked out with the Gura Gura no Mi. Now, you could say that the reason that, well, one of the reasons he did that was so no one could see what he was doing, but also, maybe it's only when he's shrouded in complete and utter darkness is Blackbeard able to use his fruit to its fullest extent, or when Blackbeard is able to truly become, like, an intangible mass of darkness and maybe absorb anything that he desires, even devil fruit abilities, maybe something like that. And you keep in mind, like, well, why doesn't he just use his abilities at night? Keep in mind, we're talking about complete darkness here. We're not just talking about, like, it's nighttime. We're talking about he cannot have any, you know, just ray of light touching his body. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be a lantern, it could be a flashlight, it could be the sun, it could be starlight, it could be moonlight. Doesn't matter what it is. Any sort of light would prevent him from achieving the full powers of his fruit. And in that regard, that would be kind of hard to find. That would be kind of hard to get into a fight with somebody when you're shrouded in complete and utter darkness, not a single light source around you. So that's why we don't get to see it too often. Once again, this isn't my theory. I'm just, you know, I'm remembering something from the subreddit, I believe. But that's a cool idea, isn't it? But in that regard, let's say we were in that complete state, I don't know if that would, like would Kizaru's fruit be able to trump that, because Kizaru can make light wherever he was at, and Blackbeard maybe needs complete darkness for it to work. So I think that it would be more of the Yami Yami no Mi being weak to the Pika Pika no Mi rather than the other way around. But at the same time, if Kizaru was able to fire off a laser, and if Blackbeard could prep by, you know, getting the Kuro Ozu ready, I think the light beam, the laser beam, would just go right into the black hole and would get absorbed like anything else. The only problem with that is Kizaru's reflexes are wicked fast, and Blackbeard is kind of slow in that regard, right? Like, yeah, he would be able to absorb it, but, oh, it's Kizaru! Alright, let me prep up the Kuro... You know, like, Kizaru's gonna pump your ass full of, like, you know, a bunch of laser bullets before you could even, you know, think to do that. So, unless you're priorly, you know, engaged, ready to set it up and absorb things around you, it's not gonna work at all. Okay, so now let's talk about Eneru's fruit. Alright, so we already know the natural weakness of Eneru's, at least one of them, is in fact the Gamu Gamu no Mi, because rubber is an insulator, and no matter what Eneru tried to do against Luffy, no matter how many volts he tried to throw at him, that dragon thing, you know, El Thor, no matter what he did, Luffy was not even phased. You know, it's not even like Luffy, like, got kind of injured, or it was just mitigated. It was 0 damage. No damage whatsoever. It's like trying to use a lightning bolt on a rock type in Pokemon. We're going back to, you know, like, you know, what, no, it's like, I always confuse those types. It's, for some reason, I always think that electricity should not affect rock types at all because they're rocks, but I think they do. I think it's just not very effective. Ground types, okay. Anyway, yeah, Luffy was not even fazed by that, to the point where he was confused of even what was going on. You know, he was just like, hmm? And then Eneru's doing like, 60 million volts dragon! And then Luffy's just, eh? You know, so that was kind of funny there. But other weaknesses he could have, and this is where we go back to the thing I was talking about, Kizaru's, you know, rubber is a really good insulator for electricity, but you know what else is also a really good insulator? Glass. Yeah, and we have not seen a glass devil fruit. I mean, yeah, I guess you could technically say Brulee's mirror fruit, but we didn't get to see her use it like that. We didn't get to see her, you know, make like throw out glass shards or something as a weapon, which makes me think it's a separate thing altogether. Her ability was more about, like, the actual effect of a mirror. Like, a mirror, you know, shows reflections of things. So, therefore, her ability is creating this alternate world, the mirror world, and, you know, putting somebody's appearance onto something else. You know, that's what the essence of a mirror is, not the actual effect of, like, you know, making glass shards appear and, like, attacking your enemy with them, or making a glass sword or a glass shield. You know, that wasn't what Brulee's fruit was about. So I'm thinking there might be a paramecia out there that does have that ability, the glass fruit, where the user can create, like, you know, a bunch of, like, glass shards all over their body to protect them, and then, like, shoot them out and stuff like that. Make a glass sword, make glass armor, you know, that would be really cool, right? And we haven't seen that yet. And that would also probably be a weakness against Eneru's electricity. And going back to Kizaru, if there was such a glass fruit, that person might be able to create a prism large enough to either trap the light or redirect it another direction, no matter how strong it was. Make the right lenses the right size and length and direction and stuff like that, and they might be able to make it go down that way. Might be able to fight against Kizaru. I could see that. I could see, like, a lens shield, and then Kizaru, you know, shoots out a laser beam, and it just hits the shield, and it gets redirected off to the side, and doesn't even hurt him. That would be pretty cool. So I thought of that, the glass fruit, as kind of like a you know, a fruit I just invented. I might do a video on that. I did one on the water fruit theory I had, and then the metal fruits. So maybe the glass fruit. That would be a cool power. Alright, so now going on to Karibo. Okay, now, Karibo, like I said, is an idiot. And he was kind of thinking, like, oh, I'm invincible because I'm a Logia, and I can, you know, capture mermaids and keep them in my body. So Karibo's fruit is the Numa no Mi. Yada ya hee, yada ya hoo, yada ya ha, yada ya ha, yada ya hee, yada ya hoo, yada ya ha. I was around back when that first dropped. What was that, like in 2006? Yeah, I was around. I was 13 years old when that hit the airwaves, kids. I was over at my friend Nick's house that day. He decided, man, I'm going to show you something funny on the internet, and he showed me that. And then I realized, guys, right then and there that mankind had reached their apex. It was all downhill from there after the Numa video. Okay. So anyway, yeah, Numa no Mi, or the mud fruit, or the swamp fruit, being able to absorb pretty much anything he wants, no matter how large it is, or how sexy it is, in Shirahoshi's case, into his body, and he could store that stuff, like, indefinitely. It seems he has, like, a bottomless pit, where he could store guns, and weapons, and people, and he can pull them out whenever he wants, and it seems like a very useful fruit. So I'm thinking, like, alright, there has to be a downside to this. There has to be some sort of negative, you know, aspect of this. And I'm thinking, like, well, if he is a swamp, then maybe he wouldn't be able to use his fruit in any sort of, like, really dry or arid environment. Ergo, heat would be his main weakness. So ovens like Netsu no Mi, or any of the other billion heat fruits that exist in movies and OVAs and stuff like that, or filler arcs, like the Adonisino had one. Yeah, so if he was, like, in a desert area like Alabasta, it might be possible that he can't turn his body into swamp because the entire area is too dry for him to do it. His mud would not be able to stay in that type of, that state, you know, that liquid state. It would just be all dried and cracked if he tried to do it. He wouldn't be able to store anything. So, yeah, I was thinking, like, that would probably make the most sense for him if he was fighting someone using heat, or, you know, fire, or Akainu's magma, any sort of heat around him, and then he wouldn't be able to use his fruit. Because that fruit really is pretty strong if he really does have, like, an infinite space inside him, or near infinite, where he can store all this stuff. And going along with that, the last Logia user we have here is Monet, who has the power of the Yuki no Mi of the Snow fruit, and same exact kind of weakness. Maybe that's the reason there's so many different Devil Fruit powers that exist in the One Piece franchise that involve heat or fire, because maybe they have to counterbalance all these other ones. Because Monet's is just straight up snow. It's not like Aokiji's, which is the chill fruit, like just cold. Not ice, cold. Which leaves me to believe why he could do the absolute zero thing, affect the temperature, not just, you know, create ice, but affect the temperature itself. But with Monet, it's just snow. It's just frozen water. That's all it is. So, once again, if you heat things up around the area to the point where snow cannot exist, then she's pretty much useless. Now, we did see Monet in the fire part of Punk Hazard when she was spying on Usopp for the first time, but she wasn't using her snow powers. She was just, you know, flying around like a harpy, and she was just keeping keeping an eye on everybody, it might have been very possible that she could not turn to snow in that environment because of the excessive heat. It was only because, you know, Punkhauser, the half that Caesar's lab was on, where she was living, was a complete Arctic wasteland. That's why she was able to take advantage of her fruit to the fullest extent there. But yeah, other than that, that might be one of the weaker ones of the Logia, if that was the case, if all it really took was just some fire or some heat, and she couldn't use her ability in that area. Yeah. Oh, and one more. We forgot about Smoker. Sorry. He was the first Logia we ever found out about, so I kind of tend to forget about him. Okay, so Smoker's fruit is kind of unique amongst the Logia, because it's like, fire can burn you, Aokiji can make ice shards to cut you, Akainu can melt you, but smoke itself can't really hurt you. I mean, well, secondhand smoke can. Don't smoke, kids, really. You know, but in terms of, like, actually physically harming you, it would just be smoke, you know, it would mildly irritate your eyes, or, you know, unless Smoker, hey, here's an idea, unless Smoker, like, actually grabbed a hold of somebody and forced the smoke into your body, like, that could be something that could mess with you. He's never really done that before. But mostly he uses it to, like, extend his own body parts out, like, so he'll make a fist, and then his arm into smoke, and then he'll use that smoke to just extend his body and punch the opponent. That's what he'll use it for. But in terms of how could you nullify that, like, well, aside from trapping Smoker in some sort of giant beaker so the smoke couldn't get out, some airtight beaker, smoke is mostly comprised of carbon monoxide and dioxide, correct? So, I mean, it depends on what you're burning, after all, but aren't there chemicals? Isn't there something you could do to make those, you know, make carbon monoxide and dioxide, like, you know, bunch together, make it into, like basically change it from a gas into a solid or a semi-solid or a liquid, like, just change its chemical state so it could no longer exist in a gas, and then after that, you know, Smoker wouldn't be able to do anything with it. So you'd, once again, it would be kind of the same thing with, you know, Ace and Sabo. You'd have to get your hands on some sort of chemical and then, like, douse Smoker with it so that the smoke, you know, couldn't exist. You know, he couldn't create it because it would just immediately get turned into something else, some other form of matter. That's what you would have to do. Either that or trap him in a giant beaker. I could see that happening as well. I guess that weakness also applies to Caesar Clown. We didn't really talk about Caesar's weakness, but yeah, it would have to be the same thing. You'd have to figure out a way to turn his gas into something else in order to prevent him from using it. Okay, but aside from that, I think that's all the Logias we got here. Yeah, that's all of them. I might do this with some other categories and stuff, discussing, like, the natural weaknesses, what you could do to actually fight against them and stuff like that. This is kind of a new thing I'm trying out, so let me know what you feel below, and let me know what you think about all the stuff I mentioned. Well, I'm not a chemist or anything, so maybe you can let me know about, like, that, like, what chemical would be perfect to put out a fire, or what chemical would be perfect to change gas to a liquid, or something like that, like, really quickly, if that, you know, type of chemical were to exist. I'm not saying it would exist in the One Piece world, but if it were to exist, because I just like talking about all these different, like, theoretical things. Like, if there was a person in our world that can turn into mud, how would you counter him? Like, well, you dry up the mud. If you had someone in this world that can turn into light, what would you do? Well, you could make a giant prism or a miniature black hole. That probably the former would be easier to do, I would imagine, unless you worked for CERN, and you know, to stop the light or trap it in some way, right? Okay. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Let me know what you feel about this below. I'm gonna go and have a refreshing glass of ice water. My ice melted. God, what am I gonna do with myself now?